Hi, my name's Scott, the Miniature Maniac, and today I want to share with you an addiction of mine, exploring local hobby stores for hobby inspiration. Today, we'll be looking at one of my favorite stores in my area. What up, Mini family? Do you guys remember TV about 15 years ago? We used to have shows where people would rush through the aisles of big box stores trying to fill shopping carts full of however many items they could fit.
What shoppers these guys are! Look at them go!
Well, today we're kind of doing that, but the hobby version. This is Hub Hobby, a local store in my area that I love to frequent. And the reason why I love it is because in every single aisle, there's something new to discover, whether that's a tool or a material. So today, we're gonna go through the aisles, we're gonna pick some items, and at the end of it, we're gonna make a cool display base. Let's check it out. All right, aisle number one, we got some Hot Wheels that you could use in things like Gaslands with some modifications and some different aircrafts for like hot wings. We have some larger vehicles that you could use in dioramas for things that are a larger scale, like 75mm. Oh boy! We have model kits of all kinds of variety, historical, and then on the other side of the aisle we have, of course, Gundam models, a field that I have not yet broken into, and apparently also a model kit for Woody from Toy Story. Oh, what's this? Little bases for figure? Oh! What the f is this? A turntable I need to know what this is. Little Snow White globe. And then a battery powered turntable with a mirror bottom. I think I need to have this. All right, now we're starting to get into some interesting scratch building materials for display bases. Every single hobby store has something like this, a set of brass and copper and lead wire and different kinds of pipes of different diameters. This stuff is display making gold mines. Come over here. This brass sheet here that is super thin is shim stock, and it's great for making things like banners or cloth because you can cut it simply with like a pair of scissors or an X-Acto knife and bend it to whatever dimension you want. It's super useful. Another one of my favorite areas, the tiny tool area. I don't know what it is, but whenever you take something and you make it tiny, it just makes it better, obviously. Look at this tiny hammer. I love it! Now we just need a tiny anvil. Then we have a few options for two-part epoxies and gap fillers like Tamiya, putty. These are all very helpful when doing scratch building stuff as well. Okay, here is the mother lode of scratch building stuff. You have the Styrene stock, and we could sit here and talk about this stuff for a long time. But let's just look through a few items just to kind of illustrate how cool this stuff is. Okay, I'm not sure if anyone remembers, but I made a diorama of a church, and I made the siding all myself by using thin pieces of styrene, whereas I could just have bought styrene stock that was already in that format, saving me a ton of time. So you have siding, you have quarter round and half round in various scales, you have square tubing, you have I-beams, you have channeling. You have everything you could ever want to make a scale structure. It's absolutely amazing. There's just so many options. One of the things I love so much about hobby stores is that while Amazon has more of an option, all those options are almost hidden from you. They're hard to find all of these cool things, whereas in a store, it's a much more easily digestible format. You can just walk through and look around, and you can even walk through multiple times and find new things each time that just kind of spark creativity. Okay, for some reason I'm feeling like we're gonna make something post-apocalyptic. That's what I'm feeling right now. And what's inspiring that right now is this diamond plate that I'm seeing here. So we're gonna wanna pick up some of that. Creative juices flowing. These would be great for making like any kind of structure. You could make it out of something like foam core and then glue on like a veneer of this and get a bunch of really cool looking bricks. And you wouldn't need to do a bunch of tedious things with gluing on small resin bricks. Super handy. Dude, how clean do you think this carpet is? This is how you find the good stuff, okay? You gotta get a little dirty, okay? You ain't gonna find anything good standing up. All right, post-apocalyptic, we got diamond plating, we got some banner material, we got some cool stairs, maybe some like some smokestacks that could use. So like maybe some of this brass piping. Brass is great because it's kind of easy to cut, so is aluminum. So we'll grab some to make like some smokestack kind of stuff. Oh, so many options. What is this? Oh my. Okay, this is what I'm talking about. Okay, I've actually never seen this, and I've been here like 30 times. This is the kind of like corrugated aluminum sheet that you would see on like a model scale roof for like a building. This is absolutely awesome. Okay, here's another kind of like just sweet find that would be otherwise hard to find in other stores. You have like various shells of various calibers and like missiles and things. Just random little bits are just fantastic for like just sprinkling into dioramas. I love it. If we're making a display base, we need a plinth of some kind. And in a lot of like hobby stores, you have this section of like balsa wood of different kinds of diameters. And here we have some just normal wood. Let's pick something out of here to make kind of a plinth for our display base. Okay. Now we're starting to get into the model train area, which this is fantastic. I love how you have a concentrated version of multiple hobbies in the span of just a few aisles. What's Daddy gonna buy in this aisle? my shopping spree. Why don't we get a basket? We're storing my goods there. There's no one in the store, so no one can take my goods. Also, I didn't pay for them yet. All right, this is fantastic. These telephone poles, again, great for like a little diorama just to add in a little bit of diversity here and there. I know, okay? But they don't know that. Amber, killing the movie making magic. For the last thing, because this is kind of like a post-apocalyptic sci-fi diorama, we need some greeblies. Let's see, who is going to get harvested for my base making pleasure? Oh yeah, I think this is the one. Okay, yeah. Star Short, it's got all that crazy stuff on top. Come on, that's gotta be it. All right, cool. I think we have enough stuff combined with what I already have at home to make an absolutely awesome sci-fi post-apocalyptic diorama. All right, we're back at home with the haul from Hub Hobby, and we're very ready to make an absolutely awesome display base from scratch. I was really inspired by the brick imprinted styrene I found in the store, so I wanted to make a brick structure. I cut pieces to make a basic cube that would fit on my balsa wood plinth. I cut out a lot of rectangles for future doors, windows, and garage doors. For some reason, I couldn't shake the idea that this building was going to be an abandoned single-star call repair shop, so I just followed what my muse was telling me. The scale will likely be messed up, and that's really okay. Scale is often something that's stretched and played with in the miniature hobby for the sake of creativity, so I'll be doing that here. I just wanted to jam-pack as many story-driving details on this thing as possible. Despite this being a sci-fi concept, it's important to draw inspiration from real life at times, which is why you'll see me trimming out windows and doors with even more, you guessed it, styrene. It can help the viewer of your piece to more readily identify what's going on in your idea if you include elements that exist in reality or are inspired by reality. I use styrene for a lot of details on this building because it's like an advanced version of Legos. It can be anything you want it to be. I have a good supply of various size square and circular stock, and the sky is the limit with this stuff. Cut it, heat it, sand it, glue it, shape it. You can do pretty much anything with it. A lot of my corners weren't matching up perfectly because I was being a little haphazard with how I was cutting stuff, but that's nothing a little bit of Tamiya white putty or Milliput can't fix in short order. Before I moved on to the other smaller details on the building, let me tell you about today's sponsor, and that's my local hobby store, Hub Hobby, which might be obvious to you. Hub Hobby is a small, family-owned and operated business in the Twin City area of Minnesota that just recently celebrated their 40th year doing business. They also have an online store for their products as well. More on that later. Hub Hobby is one of the 2 hobby stores in Minnesota that I frequent and will often find excuses to need to go inside if my wife and I happen to be driving by. As you saw earlier, they have an insane variety of model hobby materials, from Gundam kits to model kits to AK interactive enamel washes and every styrene product you can imagine and everything in between. They recently also became an official carrier of Games Workshop products in this area as well, so they have Citadel products and GW models in store. They also have a lot more than just hobby products. I've purchased soldering equipment from there. My wife and I have purchased puzzles and STEM-related gifts for our younger nieces and nephews. There's a huge RC car area complete with every part that you can imagine, and so much more. Each staff member is knowledgeable in their respective area and can help you out should you need it. If you're in the area, you owe it to yourself to browse the aisles and explore their wonderful catalog. If you aren't in the area, however, check out their online store,
While it doesn't have all of their products, it still has a lot of wonderful things like the Star Destroyer we used for the bits in today's video, or a lot of great tools which I love simply due to the fact that they're just smaller versions of the real thing. Look at this tiny hammer. I love it! Their site is linked in the description below. Check it out or travel to one of their 2 locations in Minnesota. You will not regret it. Thanks for sponsoring this episode, Hub Hobby. Now back to the build. I needed a reason to use that awesome aluminum roofing material I found at Hub Hobby. So, over the garage, door, and window, I added a little rain cover. That's likely too small to be of any real use, but it helps add more dimension to the building. I constructed it first out of styrene with 2 little, approximately right-angle triangles and a rectangular piece. I then could glue on the aluminum part with super glue. It's worth mentioning that you can buy the aluminum shim stock and specific tools to make stuff like this as well, so you can create the perfect detail for your project depending on what scale it is. Another amazing find I had at Hub Hobby was a little set of styrene letters and numbers. These are incredibly hard to make, so having a little set is very advantageous. I glued these on to one of the sides of my building, being careful to make sure they were nice and straight. I also glued on some sci-fi bits I had to the building. Old bits are not only amazing for conversions, but also for spicing up your terrain. For the garage door, I broke out that brass shim stock and cut out 3 rectangles and battered them up a little bit and superglued them to a piece of styrene. This stuff is so nice and thin and can look in scale for a lot of applications that styrene might not be suited for. For instance, I had a push plate for my door that I used this brass shim stock for, and it was perfect. It makes the steel kick plate it's right next to look a little too thick and chunky. I wanted someone to be sitting on top of the building and kind of hanging out, so obviously I needed to make a lawn chair. My first attempt was with some styrene round stock I had. John let me know that it was a little too chunky, so I took some very thin aluminum and remade it using the dimensions of the first one as my guide. I glued on some tiny feet, and then I was on to a solution for the rubber strapping you see in chairs like this. The best material would be a thin sheet of plastic, like a teacher might use on an overhead projector in the early 2000s. Are those things still in use nowadays? Even better would be a sheet of that stuff that is already colored, say in like a lime green. I couldn't find any, so I used the thicker variety of plastic that you might find in blister packs and whatnot. I cut small strips and adhered them in my thin, fragile frame with PVA glue initially, and then I reinforced it with super glue later on. The reinforcement was necessary because I was going to be cutting these to length with scissors, and without that extra glue, they would just be torn off the piece. This is where a thinner piece of material would have come in handy. The super glue ended up fogging up all the clear glass, and to resolve this, I tried brushing on acetone, isopropyl alcohol, and they didn't work. But what did work was super glue uncure. I brushed it on and it was nice and clean. No more fogging. I then painted the strips with Tamiya clear green, and I had a fun little lawn chair, which is a little bit rough around the edges, but that's okay. Now, if you're relaxing in a lawn chair, you gotta have a cooler of beer, right? I constructed a little box out of styrene and plastic cement and glued on a paperclip handle, and I had a cooler. I glued in some 3D printed bottles from a previous project, and I had a pretty cute little detail. Now, if you got a lawn chair and beer, the next obvious inclusion in my head is a satellite. So far, this diorama isn't really shaping up to be much of a sci-fi diorama. I busted out that Star Destroyer model kit from Hub Hobby and harvested some bits. I found something that looked like a panel, which I promptly glued on at the side of my building, and a thruster, which looked like it could go along with the dish, and a track pin to make for a pretty bizarro sci-fi gun/satellite. Why I included this will become a little bit more apparent in a little bit. I used some aluminum wire to act as a cable, and now I have a strange sci-fi bit on my otherwise fairly normal building. I was a little concerned about my balsa wood plinth, so I glued on a thin veneer of plastic to protect and cover it up and sanded the edges so it was nice and neat. I've done this exact thing before in the past and it works great. It makes for a really nice smooth plinth. I think we're ready for some paint. The first detail I want to tackle were the bricks. I started by airbrushing on some browns and yellows, intentionally getting a splattery textured effect. Then, with transparent paints like inks and contrast paints, I began to paint a smattering of brown and red tones. I wanted the texture to show through. I was also trying to not hit the white grout because typically with red brick buildings, the grout is often an off-white. While the texture undercoat did work fine enough, I overestimated my brush control abilities and was not able to get a cool white grout line that looked consistent. I instead applied some brown enamel washes, which might let some of the white stick around, but really dirtied it up and added some definition to the bricks. As a last little bit of added detail, I edge highlighted on some pastel colors to about half of the bricks. I didn't want to go crazy highlighting everything, but adding a few here and there helps. For the concrete around the top of the building, I sponged on various shades of gray and blue-gray, which for me creates a very nice concrete effect that takes little to no effort. For some extra points, I did a little bit of edge highlighting and recess shading with some white and black paint, respectively. There was a decent amount of rust on this building, and I accomplished it differently in a few spots, so let's go over those. For the window trim, I wanted to give the impression that the metal trim had paint chip away in large spots. I started by first sponging on some black, being pretty intentional about how large certain areas were. I then painted brown, orange, and bright orange in layers inside of this black to build up color toward the bottom of each chip. Because the chips are highlighted toward the bottom, it gives the impression that the hole is deeper toward the top of the chip and shallower toward the bottom, which is more of a cool effect than one that makes sense, so don't think too hard about it. For other details like the door's kick plate, the rain covers, and the roof, I messily wet blended on some rusty tones and then sponged on some bright silver colors. The silver was great because it only got caught on the raised details, leaving the rusty tones to remain in the deep parts, which is great because that's where rust would collect, because that's where moisture would pool up. Lastly, I added some anti-alien graffiti to the battered up garage and printed out an alien propaganda poster with a regular inkjet printer and paper and stuck it to my building with Mod Podge. I promptly stained and ripped the poster to make it fit in with my post-apocalyptic setting. Lastly, we need a character for this building, and I think I have the perfect one to finish off this base. This piece was scratch built entirely from pieces I found in my local hobby store, and I had so much fun making it. Local game stores are so cool to me, and I feel like an old man for saying it, but it's totally true. I love waywardly browsing the aisles, finding inspiration from everything. I truly had no idea what I was going to make before I walked in there, and just holding the materials in my hand and seeing all the options in front of me helped me to dream up this weird idea. This miniature is from Mr. Lee's Minis and was collaboratively created with Roman the Pot for a community event he's running right now on Massive Voodoo, where you use this character in fun and creative ways and enter it alongside others in a friendly competition. The details for that are linked in the description below. I hope to see some Miniacs entering their creative ideas. I've been pretty intentional in not telling the full story of my piece, and I'm curious what you think it is based on the details that I've added. Let me know in the comment section below if you figured it out. That's going to do it for this one, guys. Thanks for sticking around to the end of the video. It means a lot to me. If you like the channel and you want to support it, there are a number of ways that you can do it, namely a Patreon campaign with a bunch of fun rewards, or hobby equipment that I recommend linked in the description below with Amazon affiliate links, or also you can buy my Duchess model, a vampire 75mm model that I created, along with a digital course that teaches you how to paint that model. All things linked in the description below. Subscribe or die! But most importantly, don't forget to paint my